This was something that I always said from the word go. We shouldn't just make a formula thing. We should try and be different as much as possible all the time. And tried very hard to do that. And sometimes I thought we were going, I thought I'd, sort of being too risky and going too far out. But it paid off, and Brian and I had a kind of plan. We would issue a single every 3 months and an album twice a year. And that was a kind of general scheme we worked out. We didn't stick religiously to it, but it was the broad basis of our working out. And every album that came out, I wanted to be different from the one before. And as soon as the Beatles realized their creative abilities in the studio, they got hooked onto this thing of really building something new each time. They were more of interest than me. And they were coming to me saying, what new sounds can we use? What instruments do you don't know about? Here's George Martin. Tomorrow Never Knows certainly was the beginnings of a new era. The kind of surrealistic look at building up sound pictures. And I thought that was great. But going into Sgt. Pepper, there was a kind of development through to Tomorrow Never Knows, through Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane, which was a single, which was the beginning of the Pepper album. But it wasn't part of the Pepper album because we wanted a single album. I mean, you can see the connections between Tomorrow Never Knows, Strawberry Fields, right through to Day in the Life. It's all there. Here's George Martin. Well, the beginning of the recordings were not really Pepper because we had been out of the studio for a while and we came back in to start a new batch of recordings. And the very first one we recorded was Strawberry Fields. And that was going to be the beginning of a new album. And when you think about it, Strawberry Fields is very much akin to Pepper than anything we'd had before. And then we recorded When I'm 64, and then we recorded Penny Lane. And then we had a break for Christmas, and we started again in February. Now, the reason why we had Strawberry Fields and Penny Lane issued as a single was that in those days we always made the single separate from the album, and we needed a single. So I whipped it off the tracks we've been doing, kept When I'm 64, and then we started in seriously doing the album. But Pepper itself didn't become a reality until more or less halfway through the project. We worked on it for about 5 months, and Paul brought this song in about a mythical band. And I don't know whose idea it was. It may have been Paul's, to turn the whole thing into a record by that mythical band. And then from then on it just grew by itself, like Topsy. It almost seemed to have a will of its own. I think the Strawberry Fields meant the major change in the boys' lives. It was the beginning of the Pepper episode, and it was the beginning of the highly imaginative, some people say psychedelic way of writing. I prefer to think of it as being complete tone-poem imagery. I think it's more like a modern Debussy, if you like, or Ravel. I think that their ideas there had developed enormously in a very flowery way, but a very sensible way. And I regard Strawberry Fields as being really a very great song. Penny Lane was entirely a Paul composition. Strawberry Fields was entirely a John composition. And I think you can see the difference in the two there. With Strawberry Fields, we did 2 recordings of this. The first time, we made a record with just the boys themselves. And it worked out pretty well, I thought, anyway. And John went away and listened to the lacquers that we cut of it. And he came back to me and said, George, he said, I don't think it's really what I had in mind when I first wrote it. And I have to admit, I said, well, honestly, John, it has worked out rather heavier than I first thought when you sat and played it to me on an acoustic guitar. I thought it was going to be a little more flowing than it has been. He said, well, that's the point. So I want to make it a little more smooth. Can you do a score for me and we'll do a new record? So I scored it for some cellos and for some trumpets and various things. And we made another record, of Strawberry Fields Forever. And he went away and listened to that. And he said, it's very much better. I like it much better. But it's still not right. There's a lot in the original recording that's really better than this one. It's pity we can't have the two together. He said, if we could take the beginning of one and the end of another, that'd be great. So I listened to them both, and I said, well, there's only one thing, John. To begin with, they're completely different tempos, and they're in 2 different keys. Apart from that, it'd be very easy to cut them together. So he looked at me and smiled and he said, well, I'm sure you can fix it. Living. They always wanted to push the frontiers further and further on, and they were getting more and more difficulty in realising what they were trying to get, because they were becoming more and more incoherent. So my main job was to try and get inside them and find out what it was they were trying to do and make it practical. And it was really Jeff Emmerich and I. Jeff Emmerich was the young engineer I had, who started at the end of Revolver. It was our main problem was making it practical and realising all these dreams and worrying very much about the technical side and not losing generations too much on the dubs from third track and so on.
Did you approve of all the things they were saying?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was very much so. I'm very much into experimenting too. See, don't forget, from my point of view, it was rather going back in like a full cycle. It was like making a Peter Sellers record again. Doing Sgt. Pepper, for me, it was going back in time. I was able to use sound effects. And I was building up a sound picture. That was just what it was. Painting and sound. It was great for me. I loved it. This, in fact, again, was people accused us of saying it referred to puncture marks in people's arms, heroin addicts and all that kind of nonsense. The way that those lyrics came about was dead simple. John would often take his lyrics from quite ordinary, commonplace events, and that very day he'd seen a copy of the Daily Mail, which in fact had a report in it from one councillor of Blackburn, Lancashire, that the roads of Blackburn were absolutely disgusting, and that he'd been round and he counted over 4,000 holes in the roads. And John thought this was rather funny, and I did too. And so he included it as a verse in his song, 4,000 holes in Blackburn, Lancashire. How much will it take to fill the Albert Hall? Here's George Martin. Well, you know, the specification for All You Need Is Love was pretty rigid. It had to be a new song. It was going to be the English contribution to an international program, which was going out and being seen by 200 million viewers. That was what they told us. Enough to terrify the pants off anyone. And they wanted it to be a live performance in the studio. So the boys never thought twice about the awe-inspiring thing of being faced with that. They just said they'd do it anyway. And so they came to me and said, well, will you do a score for it and wrap it up for us? And John wrote this song. I said, well, let's do a track, first of all. Let's hedge our bets. And so we went in the studios and we did a basic rhythm track on John's song. And I wrote the introduction and the tag ending. And we got a band in the studio, and the boys performed it live. They actually sang, in the studio live, and they had an audience there. And Mike Vickers conducted the band in the studio, and I was in the control room with Jeff.
Loves you, yeah.
All right, ready? Let's go for it.
When we finished the track, or rather, when we finished the broadcast, I said, well, obviously we're going to issue this record. Now let's work on it. So the broadcast went out as one thing, but then I overdubbed John's voice again and double-tracked it and put extra voices on, and then issued the live record in that form. So it wasn't quite what went out on television, but most people remember it that way.
His meditation gives you confidence enough to withstand something like this, even the short amount we've had.
And then the thing that we've got to know about, there's no real such thing as death anyway. I mean, it's death on a physical level, but life goes on everywhere and you just keep going, really. But so the thing is, it's not as disappointing as it is and it isn't, And the thing about the comfort is to know that he's okay.